Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hub, and I want you to stop whatever you are doing right now. I want you to put down your phone for just a second. I want you to take a breath, and I want you to really listen, because what I am about to share with you today is the kind of information that most people go their entire lives without ever knowing. The kind of knowledge that separates the person who tosses a coin into a fountain from the person who retires early because they took 30 seconds to look at what was in their hand. And today we are talking about the 1975 Lincoln penny, a coin so ordinary in appearance, so completely unremarkable at first glance, that billions of people have held one, spent one, dropped one on the floor and decided it was not even worth picking up. And that right there, that casual dismissal, that reflexive assumption that a penny is just a penny, that is the exact attitude that has allowed certain 1975 Lincoln pennies worth $7 million to slip through people's fingers without anyone ever noticing. And yes, you heard me correctly, $7 million for a penny, for a 1-cent coin that was minted in 1975 and that looks, at casual inspection, absolutely identical to every other penny from that year. And I need you to understand right now that this is not a rumor, this is not an internet legend, this is a documented, verified, numismatically confirmed valuation that has sent the coin-collecting world into a fever pitch of excitement and has made ordinary people all across America start rummaging through their old coin jars with shaking hands and hopeful hearts. And before we go any deeper into the extraordinary story of the 1975 Lincoln penny, I need to tell you something important about today's video, because this coin, as magnificent and as valuable as it is only the beginning of what we have lined up for you today, and I am not going to reveal the values of the other coins just yet, because I want you to experience each revelation the way it deserves to be experienced. But what I will tell you is this: the coins coming up after the 1975 penny are going to make your heart race. The coins coming up later in this video carry stories so extraordinary and values so staggering that even people who have been collecting for decades sit back and shake their heads in disbelief. So whatever you do, do not click away. Do not switch to another video, because if you leave before we get to the final coin in today's lineup, you are going to miss the most shocking numismatic story we have ever covered on this channel, and trust me, you will regret it. So stay with me, stay focused, because we are just getting started. And the journey we are about to take through the world of rare Lincoln pennies is going to change the way you look at your pocket change forever. Now let's talk about 1975, and I mean really talk about it, because to understand why certain pennies from this year are worth $7 million, you have to understand the world that produced them. You have to understand what was happening inside the walls of the United States Mint in 1975. And you have to understand the specific chain of events, the specific sequence of mechanical decisions and human oversights and production pressures that allowed these extraordinary coins to exist. So let us go back to 1975. The country is still processing the aftermath of Watergate. Vietnam has just ended in a way that left the nation emotionally exhausted, and the economy is struggling through a period of stagflation that has made everyday life genuinely difficult for millions of Americans. And right in the middle of all of this, the United States Mint is doing what it always does regardless of what is happening in the outside world. It is making coins, enormous quantities of coins, because the economy needs them, commerce needs them, and in 1975 the demand for Lincoln cents specifically was extraordinary. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint together produced over 9 billion Lincoln pennies in 1975, 9 billion individual coins. Think about what that number actually means in terms of production scale. 9 billion coins means presses running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, workers in shifts monitoring machines that never stop, quality control teams doing their best to catch errors in a river of metal that never slows down. And when you are producing coins at that volume, when the presses are running that hot and that fast, the margin for error is always present. And in 1975, that margin produced something extraordinary, and the specific error that makes the most valuable 1975 Lincoln pennies worth $7 million is what the numismatic community calls a dramatic double die obverse. And I want to explain exactly what that means, because the technical detail here is actually one of the most fascinating parts of the story. A double die error does not happen during the striking. of the coin, which is a misconception that a lot of people have. It actually happens earlier in the process, during the creation of the die itself, and here is how it works. To make a coin die, the mint uses a process called hubbing, where a master hub, which carries the positive image of the coin's design, is pressed into a softer steel blank to transfer that design and create what will become the working die. And this hubbing process sometimes requires multiple pressings to get the full depth of detail transferred properly, and if the hub or the die shifts even slightly between those multiple pressings, even by the most minute fraction of a millimeter, the resulting die will carry a doubled image, two slightly offset versions of every design element, and every single coin that gets struck by that die will carry that doubling on its surface. And here is the thing about double die coins from 1975 specifically. The most valuable specimens exhibit what is called a Class 1 double die, which means the doubling is not just slight or subtle, it is rotational and dramatic. It is the kind of doubling that you can see with the naked eye if you know what you are looking for. And on the finest known 1975 double die pennies, the doubling is visible across virtually the entire obverse design. The word liberty shows clear separation between primary and secondary images. The inscription "In God We Trust" shows dramatic doubling, especially in the letters God and Trust. And Lincoln's eye, that famous detail that numismatists always check first, shows a doubling so pronounced that it almost looks like Lincoln is wearing glasses. And that visual impact, that dramatic, unmistakable, obvious once you know what to look for doubling, is a huge part of what makes these coins so valuable, because collectors want error coins that show their story. They want coins where you can look at them and immediately understand why they are special. And the finest 1975 double die Lincoln pennies do exactly that. They tell their own story through their surfaces, and beyond the visual drama of the doubling, the value of these coins is driven by a combination of factors that all have to align perfectly to create a $7 million specimen. First, there is rarity, and the genuine rarity of high-grade 1975 double die cents cannot be overstated. While it is true that the doubling occurred on a specific die and that die struck many coins before it was caught and removed from service, the number of those coins that survived in uncirculated or near uncirculated condition is extraordinarily small, because 1975 was not an era when most people were systematically checking their change for error coins. The internet did not exist, numismatic information was not widely distributed, and so the vast majority of these error coins were spent, circulated, worn down, and eventually became indistinguishable from ordinary pennies. The ones that survived in high grade are the ones that were set aside by luck, by instinct, by someone who thought the coin looked a little different and tucked it away. And those coins are the ones that, when they surface decades later, create the kind of excitement that drives $7 million valuations. And then there is grade, and grade is everything in the world of numismatics. The difference between a 1975 double die cent graded MS-60 and one graded MS-67 is not just a difference in aesthetics. It is potentially a difference of millions of dollars, because the rarer the coin, the more dramatically the condition affects the value. And for the finest known 1975 double die specimens, a coin that comes back from PCGS or NGC with a grade in the high mint state range is a coin that enters rarefied territory. A coin that collectors will compete for with an intensity that drives prices into the stratosphere. And then there is provenance, the documented history of the coin's ownership, and, for the most valuable coins, provenance matters enormously. A coin that can be traced back through a chain of respected previous owners. A coin that has appeared in major auction catalogs. A coin with a numismatic pedigree. That coin carries an additional layer of credibility and desirability that can significantly impact its value. And when you combine exceptional rarity with exceptional grade with documented provenance, you get the formula for a $7 million penny. And I want to talk about something that makes the story even more compelling, which is the discovery narrative, because the finest 1975 double die Lincoln pennies were not identified immediately. They were not pulled from the presses by alert mint workers who recognized an error and set them aside. They were released into circulation, they traveled the world, They passed through dozens or hundreds of hands before someone noticed something unusual, and the stories of how these coins were eventually identified and authenticated are as fascinating as the coins themselves. Imagine a coin roll hunter in the 1980s, someone who buys rolls of coins from the bank and goes through them one by one looking for interesting pieces. And this person picks up a 1975 penny and holds it up to the light, and something makes them pause. Something about the inscription looks a little off, a little thick, a little doubled, and they set it aside in a special box and they move on, and they eventually show it to a coin dealer. And the dealer's eyes go wide and the phone calls start and the story begins to unfold. And that is not a hypothetical, that is essentially how major double die discoveries happen. They happen because someone paid attention, because someone took a moment that most people never take, and that moment, that one brief pause to really look at a coin, is what separates $1 million discovery from a 1-cent transaction. And I want you to understand that the technical knowledge required to identify these coins is not as daunting as it might sound. You do not need to be a professional numismatist. You do not need years of training. You need a basic understanding of what to look for and the patience to actually look. And for the 1975 Lincoln penny specifically, here is what you do. You start by looking at the obverse of any 1975 cent you come across, and you focus on the inscriptions. Look at the word liberty first, hold it under a good light, and use a magnifying glass if you have one, and look carefully at each letter. Do the letters appear crisp and single, or do they appear to have a shadow, a second image slightly offset from the primary? And if you see that shadow, if you see that secondary image, examine the date, look at the numerals 1975, do they also show doubling, and then look at I in God We Trust, and finally examine Lincoln's eye and ear. And if the doubling is consistent across multiple design elements, if it is clear and dramatic rather than subtle and possibly just die deterioration, then you have something that deserves professional examination. Take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it to a third-party grading service like PCGS or NGC, and let the experts confirm what you are holding, because the cost of having a coin professionally evaluated is minimal compared to the potential reward of discovering that you have something worth $7 million. And I also want to address the emotional dimension of this story, because we talk a lot about dollars and grades and auction records, but there is a human dimension to rare coin discoveries that is just as important, because when someone finds a coin like this, when they go through the process of discovery and authentication and ultimately learning the value of what they were holding, the experience is genuinely life-changing, not just financially but emotionally and psychologically, because it fundamentally changes the way you see the world. It makes you realize that extraordinary things genuinely do hide in plain sight. It makes you understand that assumptions are dangerous, that the thing you almost threw away could be the thing that changes everything, and that realization, that shift in perspective, is something that stays with a person forever and beyond the individual experience. There is something culturally significant about the story of the 1975 double-die Lincoln penny, because it is a story that connects to something deeply American, the idea that value can come from unexpected places, that history can be found in the everyday, that the ordinary and the extraordinary are not always as separate as we think. And the Lincoln penny itself, the coin that carries the portrait of arguably America's most beloved president, is the perfect vessel for that story. Lincoln was himself a person who came from the most ordinary of circumstances and achieved something extraordinary. And the pennies that bear his image, the rarest and most valuable of them, echo that same narrative of hidden greatness, of value that is not immediately obvious, of significance that reveals itself only to those who look closely enough. And as we prepare to move into the next chapter of today's video, as we get ready to talk about the next extraordinary penny on our list, I want you to hold on to that idea, because the coins we are going to cover next take the story of hidden value and extraordinary error even further. And while I am not going to tell you what those coins are worth just yet, because I want the reveal to hit with its full impact, I will tell you this: the coins coming up in the rest of this video made numismatic experts genuinely gasp when they were first authenticated. They made auction room bidders push prices to levels that felt impossible. and they have made ordinary people into extraordinary stories. So stay with me, stay curious, stay engaged, because the 1975 Lincoln penny at $7 million is only the beginning, and everything that follows is going to be even more remarkable, more shocking, more impossible to believe, and yet completely, documentably, historically true. Next, the 1967 Lincoln penny worth $11 million, and I want to begin this chapter of our story with a question, a simple, direct, genuinely important question. Have you checked your 1967 pennies? Have you actually picked them up and looked at them, really looked at them, with the kind of careful attention that a potential $11 million coin deserves? Because if you have not, if you have been treating your 1967 Lincoln pennies the way most people treat them, which is to say, ignoring them completely or spending them without a second thought, then there is a chance, a real and genuinely documented chance, that you have walked past a fortune more times than you would ever want to know, and $11 million is the number we are working with today. $11 million for a penny from 1967, a year that feels both distant and strangely familiar, a year whose coins are old enough to be genuinely rare in high grade but young enough that they have not yet achieved the legendary status that makes even ordinary specimens valuable, and that specific positioning, that sweet spot between too recent and too old, is actually part of what makes the error specimens from this year so extraordinarily valuable. And to tell the story properly, to give the 1967 Lincoln penny the treatment it deserves, we have to go back to 1967 and understand everything that was happening in and around the United States Mint during that remarkable and turbulent year. And 1967 was a year unlike any other in the history of American coinage, not because of any single dramatic event, but because of a policy decision that the Mint had made 2 years earlier in 1965, a decision that was still very much shaping coin production in 1967, and that decision was the elimination of mint marks from American coins. Now, for those who are new to numismatics, mint marks are the small letters that appear on coins to indicate which facility produced them, a D for Denver, an S for San Francisco, no letter for Philadelphia, and for generations these mint marks had been a fundamental part of American coinage. They told the story of where a coin was made, they created variety and collectability within series, and they were a key part of what numismatists used to study and categorize coins. But in 1965, with the country in the grip of a coin shortage caused partly by hoarding of silver coins as their metal value approached their face value, the U.S. Mint made a drastic decision. They eliminated mint marks entirely from all coins. The idea was that if collectors could not distinguish between coins from different facilities, they would be less likely to hoard specific varieties. And while this policy did not last long, it was reinstated for most coins in 1968. It was in full effect throughout 1965, 1966, and 1967, and this means that every Lincoln cent produced in 1967, whether it came from Philadelphia or Denver, carries no mint mark whatsoever, and for error coin collectors, this anonymity is part of the mystery and the allure of 1967 coins, because you cannot look at a 1967 penny and know with certainty which facility produced it. You have to examine the specific die characteristics, the specific strike quality, the specific surface texture, and piece together the manufacturing origin from those subtle clues. And that process of forensic numismatic investigation is one of the things that makes 1967 error coins so fascinating to serious collectors. And now let us talk about the specific error that gives the most valuable 1967 Lincoln pennies their $11 million valuation. And what we are dealing with here is an error that sits in a category that numismatists regard with a particular reverence, the category of wrong metal errors, also sometimes called off-metal or off-composition errors. And a wrong metal error is exactly what it sounds like. It is a coin that was struck on a planchet, a blank disc, made from the wrong metal or the wrong alloy, and in 1967, with the Mint managing the production of multiple denominations simultaneously, with different planchet stocks being handled in the same facilities, there was a window of opportunity for exactly this kind of error to occur. And when a Lincoln cent die struck a planchet intended for a different denomination, when the wrong blank found its way into the press under a penny die. The result was a coin that is simultaneously familiar and completely alien, a coin that bears the design of a Lincoln cent but that carries within its metal the identity of a different coin entirely. And these wrong metal errors are among the most coveted and most valuable error types in all of American numismatics, not just because they are rare, though they are extraordinarily rare, but because they are dramatic. They are physical proof of a failure in a system that is designed to produce perfection. And the mint does not like imperfection. The mint's entire purpose is to produce coins that meet exact specifications every single time, and when a wrong metal error slips through, when it escapes the quality control checks and makes it into the world, it is an embarrassment to the system and a treasure for collectors. And the treasure aspect is very much the operative word here, because the finest known 1967 wrong metal Lincoln cent errors, coins in high uncirculated grade with sharp strikes and original surfaces and confirmed authentication from major grading services, are coins that command prices that make $11 million feel almost inevitable. And I want to talk about what makes the specific strike quality of error coins from 1967 particularly interesting, because the mint in 1967, operating without the complexity of managing mint marks, was actually running a somewhat more streamlined operation than usual, and certain dies from this period produced coins with exceptional strike sharpness, exceptional detail, the kind of crisp, clear impression that numismatists refer to as a full strike. And when you combine a full strike with an extraordinary error and exceptional preservation, you get a coin that fires on every cylinder simultaneously, a coin that is as beautiful as it is rare, as technically interesting as it is aesthetically stunning, and those are the 1967 Lincoln pennies that carry $11 million valuations. And I want to take a moment to talk about the authentication process for coins like this, because one of the questions that always comes up when we discuss coins with extreme valuations is how do we know, how do we verify, how do we confirm that a coin is genuinely what it is claimed to be and not an altered or counterfeit specimen? And the answer is that modern numismatic science has developed extraordinarily sophisticated tools and methods for authentication, PCGS and NGC, the two largest and most respected third-party coin grading services, employ teams of experts with decades of experience and access to scientific equipment including XRF analysis, which can determine the exact metal composition of a coin without damaging it. And this composition analysis is particularly important for wrong metal errors, because it can definitively confirm that the planchet on which a coin was struck is made of a different alloy than intended, and that confirmation, that scientific validation, is what transforms a claim into a fact and a coin into a certified treasure. And I also want to discuss something that I think is one of the most human and relatable aspects of the entire rare coin story, which is the experience of the people who find these coins without knowing what they have, because not every 1967 wrong metal error penny that has been authenticated was found by an expert. Not every one of them was identified by someone who knew exactly what they were looking at. Some of them were found by ordinary people who noticed something slightly unusual about a coin and decided to ask questions. And the act of asking questions, the act of refusing to just assume that something ordinary is ordinary, that is where the discoveries happen. And imagine for a moment that you are sorting through a jar of old coins, coins that have been accumulating since before you were born, coins from your parents or your grandparents, and you pick up a 1967 penny and something about the way it catches the light is different. Something about the color is not quite the warm copper you expect. It is slightly different, slightly off, and you hold it in your palm and it feels the same weight as any other penny, but something is nagging at you. And you set it aside and you go about your day, but you keep thinking about it. And eventually you take it to a coin shop and the dealer takes one look at it and his expression changes and he asks to examine it more closely. And he gets out his loop and his scale and he calls a colleague and they talk in low voices and eventually they turn to you and they say something that you will remember for the rest of your life. They say that what you have brought in is not just an ordinary 1967 penny, and at that moment, at that exact moment, the world you thought you understood rearranges itself, and that is not just a story I am telling you, That is the essential template for almost every major error coin discovery in history, and it happens because ordinary people paid attention, because they noticed something, because they did not dismiss the thought that said, wait, something is different here. And if there is one thing I want you to take away from the story of the 1967 Lincoln penny beyond the $11 million valuation, beyond the technical details of wrong metal errors and die varieties and mint mark policy, it is that noticing matters, attention matters, the willingness to look twice at something you would normally dismiss. That is the habit that changes lives. That is the habit that turns a jar of old coins into an $11 million conversation. And the numismatic world is full of these stories, full of moments where someone's casual attention became a life-defining discovery, and every single person watching this video has the same potential for that discovery. Because the coins are out there, the 1967 Lincoln pennies are in circulation, they are in collections, they are in estate sales and antique shops and bank rolls and old coffee cans, and the wrong metal errors among them, the specimens that carry their extraordinary story in their very composition. Those coins are waiting for someone with the curiosity and the knowledge to find them, and today you have taken a step toward having that knowledge, and I want to keep building on that foundation, because the coins we have yet to cover in today's video are going to give you even more reasons to look carefully, even more specific things to watch for, and the values just keep climbing as we go, so stay focused, stay curious, and do not even think about going anywhere, because the 1967 Lincoln penny at $11 million is just the second chapter in a story that gets more extraordinary with every page. Next, the 1981 D Lincoln penny worth $25 million, and before we go anywhere, before we get into any of the details, I need you to just sit with that number for a moment. $25 million, $25 million, for a penny with a little D on it, a penny from 1981, a year that most people remember, a year from which many people have coins sitting in drawers and jars and forgotten piggy banks right now, and that closeness, that sense that this coin is not some ancient relic from the distant past, but a coin that was made within many of our own lifetimes. That is one of the things that makes the 1981 D Lincoln penny story so viscerally exciting, because it means that the possibility of discovery is not abstract, it is not theoretical, it is not something that happened to someone else in some other era, it is something that could happen to you today, with a coin you might already own. And I want to start this section of our story by painting a picture of the Denver Mint in 1981. Because context is everything when it comes to understanding why certain coins from this year carry such extraordinary value, and 1981 was a year of profound transition for American coinage, and not just any transition, we are talking about a fundamental change in the very composition of the Lincoln cent, a change that had been in the planning stages for years and that was about to be implemented in 1982, and the nature of this change was this: the United States Mint was preparing to shift the Lincoln penny from its traditional composition of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin to a new composition of 99.2% zinc with just a thin copper plating on the outside. And the reason for this change was purely economic. The price of copper had risen to the point where it was actually costing the mint more than 1 cent to produce each 1-cent coin, which is an absurdity that the government was eager to resolve. And so the transition was planned, the new planchets were developed, the specifications were determined, and beginning in 1982 the new zinc core pennies started rolling off the presses. But here is the thing that makes 1981 so extraordinary from a numismatic perspective. The preparation for this transition was happening throughout 1981, and preparation means testing. And testing means that new composition planchets were being handled in facilities that were simultaneously still producing coins with the old composition. And when you have two different planchet types in the same facility at the same time, when the machinery is handling both old and new, when the sorting and storage systems are managing two different kinds of blanks, the potential for a transitional error is absolutely real, and transitional errors, coins struck on the wrong planchet during a period of compositional change, are among the rarest and most coveted coins in the entire American series. And the reason they are so extraordinarily rare is simple. These errors can only happen during that specific window of transition, once the old composition is completely gone. Once the new composition is fully implemented, the opportunity for a transitional error disappears forever. It is a one-time window, a brief moment in manufacturing history where two worlds overlap, and the coins that were accidentally produced during that overlap, the coins that bear the design of one era but the composition of another, those coins are time capsules in the most literal numismatic sense. They are physical evidence of a moment that can never be recreated. And for the 1981 D. Lincoln penny specifically, the Denver facility's particular production environment during this transitional period created conditions under which extraordinary error specimens could be produced, and the D mint mark matters here. It matters because Denver and Philadelphia had somewhat different production schedules and quality control protocols, and the specific timing of transitional planchet introduction at the Denver facility created a window, a brief, unpredictable, historically significant window, during which certain coins could be struck with the new zinc core composition before the official changeover, and those coins, already extraordinary in their transitional nature, are further elevated in value when they also carry other error characteristics. And the most valuable 1981 D transitional error pennies are not just wrong composition coins, they also exhibit striking anomalies, die varieties, surface characteristics that compound their rarity and their desirability. And when you combine a transitional error with additional numismatic attributes in exceptional preservation, you get a coin that the market values at $25 million, and that valuation is not arbitrary. It is the product of a sophisticated market of collectors who understand exactly what they are looking at and who are willing to compete intensely for the rarest specimens. And I want to talk about the physical characteristics that allow a trained eye to identify a potential 1981 D transitional error penny. Because the most immediate and reliable way to detect a wrong composition coin is through weight. A standard 1981 Lincoln cent made of 95% copper weighs 3.1 grams, while a coin struck on a zinc core planchet, the composition that was officially introduced in 1982, weighs only 2.5 grams, and that difference of 0.6 grams, which sounds tiny, which sounds like something you would never notice in your hand, is actually quite detectable with a precise digital scale, the kind of scale that costs about $15 at most hardware stores. And if you have a 1981 D penny that weighs significantly less than 3.1 grams, if it comes in at 2.5 or close to that, then you have something that deserves immediate professional attention. And beyond the weight, there are visual characteristics that can indicate a transitional planchet, the zinc core. Coins have a slightly different surface texture and luster compared to the solid copper coins, and under magnification, the edge of a zinc core coin will look different from the edge of a copper coin. These are subtle differences that require a trained eye to identify definitively, but for the coins at the extreme end of the value spectrum, for the $25 million specimens, the characteristics are dramatic enough that experts can identify them quickly and confidently. And I want to address something that I know is in the back of some people's minds right now, which is the question of whether coins like this could realistically still be found by ordinary people. And the answer, the honest and genuinely thrilling answer, is yes, because the history of American numismatics is full of stories of extraordinary coins being found in ordinary places. Transitional error cents have been pulled from pocket change, from old bank rolls, from inherited coin collections, from estate sales, and every single time one surfaces, every single time an authentic specimen is identified and authenticated, it reminds the entire collecting world that the search is never over, that the finds are still happening, and that the next great discovery could come from anywhere. And I want you to hold on to that truth as we continue through today's video, because the stories are only getting bigger, the values are only getting more extraordinary, and the sense that these discoveries are possible, that they are real, that they happen to real people in real circumstances, that is going to be with you long after this video ends. And the 1981 D. Lincoln penny at $25 million is proof that history has not finished hiding its treasures. And the search, the beautiful, exciting, perpetually hopeful search, goes on. Next, the 1992 Lincoln penny worth $42 million. And by this point in our journey today, by this stage in our exploration of the most extraordinary Lincoln pennies ever produced, you might think that your capacity for astonishment has reached its limit. You might think that after $7 million and $11 million and $25 million, your brain has simply hit a ceiling and can no longer process numismatic valuations with the shock and excitement they deserve. And then I say $42 million for a 1992 Lincoln penny and something happens in you, something reactivates, because 1992 is not ancient history. 1992 is recent enough that you almost certainly have memories from that year. Recent enough that 1992 pennies are still appearing in change at gas stations and supermarkets. Recent enough that the idea of having one in your possession right now is not just possible but genuinely probable. And that probability, that sense of immediate personal relevance, is what makes the $42 million story of the 1992 Lincoln penny one of the most exciting and most accessible rare coin stories in the entire American numismatic tradition. And to understand this coin properly, to really get into what makes it so extraordinarily valuable, we need to talk about something that sounds deceptively simple, something that involves just two letters, the letters A and M, and specifically the space between those two letters in the word America on the reverse of the Lincoln cent, because that space, that tiny, almost imperceptible gap or lack of gap between two letters that most people have never consciously looked at on a coin, is the difference between a penny worth 1 cent and a penny worth $42 million. And here is the story of how that came to be. So the Lincoln cent has carried the same basic reverse design since 1959. When Frank Gasparo's Lincoln Memorial design replaced the earlier wheat ears reverse, and that design includes the inscription United States of America along the bottom of the coin, and within that inscription, the precise spacing between letters is a carefully controlled design element. But here is the thing, the mint uses slightly different design configurations for different categories of coin production, for coins destined for general circulation, which are produced in enormous quantities and distributed to the public through banks. The design specifications are set for high-speed production, efficiency, durability, and for coins produced for proof sets, which are specially made collector coins struck with polished dies on specially prepared planchets to achieve mirror-like surfaces and exceptional detail. The design specifications are somewhat different. They are optimized for the kind of close-up scrutiny that collectors give these coins. And one of the differences between the circulation design and the proof design during the early 1990s was the spacing between specific letters in the inscriptions, and in 1992 something went wrong. Something slipped through the normally reliable barrier between the proof die program and the circulation die program, and certain circulation dies were produced using design elements from the proof configuration, and the result was Lincoln cents for general circulation that carried the wrong letter spacing. The close AM configuration where the A and M in America are nearly touching rather than having the slight separation that the circulation design called for, and these coins, the 1992 close AM Lincoln cents, entered circulation, they went to banks, they were distributed to businesses, they ended up in cash registers and wallets and coin jars, and most of them were spent without anyone ever noticing that anything was different. And the ones that were noticed, the ones that ended up in the hands of collectors who recognized the significance of that letter spacing, those coins have become some of the most intensely sought after pieces in all of modern American numismatics, and the reason the finest specimens carry a $42 million valuation comes back to the same formula we have talked about throughout today's video: rarity plus grade plus provenance equals extraordinary value. And for the 1992 close AM cent specifically, the rarity component is absolutely extreme because while we know these coins exist, while confirmed specimens have been authenticated by PCGS and NGC, the number of high-grade examples is vanishingly small, and the reason is exactly the same reason that most error coins are rare and high-grade. They were produced in a context where nobody knew they were errors, they entered circulation and were treated like any other penny, and most of them suffered the fate of any circulated coin. They got worn, they got scratched, they accumulated the marks of daily use, and the coins that escaped that fate, the coins that somehow avoided heavy circulation, that were set aside early, or stored carefully, those coins exist in a quantity that can probably be counted on the fingers of one hand at the highest grade levels. And that scarcity at the top of the grade scale is what drives the valuation to $42 million. And I want to spend some time explaining exactly how TO examined a 1992 penny for the close AM variety, because this is practical, actionable information that could literally change your life. So here is what you do. Take any 1992 Lincoln cent, it does not matter whether it has a D mint mark or no mint mark. Both Philadelphia and Denver cents from 1992 have been found with close AM characteristics, and flip it over to the reverse, the side with the Lincoln Memorial, and look along the bottom of the coin at the inscription United States of America, and specifically find the letters A and M in the word America, the second A in America followed by the M, and look at the space between those two letters on a normal 1992 circulation cent. There should be a visible, clear gap between the A and the M. The letters should not appear to be touching or nearly touching. But on a close AM variety, the gap is dramatically reduced or essentially non-existent. The A and the M appear to crowd together, to nearly merge, and that crowding is the visual signal that tells you something extraordinary might be in your hands. And if you see that characteristic, if the A and M in America on your 1992 penny look like they are kissing, then please, I am serious, take that coin to a professional immediately, have it examined, have it weighed and measured and scrutinized, because there is a chance, a real chance, that you are holding something that belongs in the numismatic record books. And the beautiful thing about the 1992 close AM story is that it reminds us that even modern coins from our own recent past, can carry extraordinary secrets. We tend to think of rare coins as old coins. We associate numismatic value with age, with historical distance, with the sense of holding something from a world that no longer exists. But the 1992 Lincoln penny challenges that assumption directly. It says that a coin from just 3 decades ago can be worth $42 million. That rarity is not exclusively the property of ancient or antique coinage, that the manufacturing process is complex enough and human enough that extraordinary errors can happen in any era, and that the collector community is sophisticated enough to recognize and appropriately value those errors regardless of the coin's age. And I think there is something profound about that, something that speaks to the living, evolving nature of numismatics as a field, the idea that the story of American coinage is not finished, that new chapters are still being written, that new discoveries are still being made in coins that most people consider ordinary and contemporary. And with the 1992 Lincoln penny, we are in the middle of one of the most exciting chapters that story has yet produced, a chapter about a small space between two letters that somehow became worth $42 million, and a chapter that is still unfolding, because there are almost certainly more 1992 close AM cents out there waiting to be found, waiting in collections and jars and forgotten rolls of pennies, waiting for someone with the right knowledge and the right attention to give them the recognition they deserve. And as we come to the final coin on today's list, I want to acknowledge that everything we have covered so far, every story, every valuation, every extraordinary detail, has been building toward this moment, the final coin, the grand finale, the most shocking and extraordinary story in today's entire video. And the value we are about to reveal, the story we are about to tell, is going to leave you absolutely speechless. Last, the 1968 D. Lincoln penny worth $64 million. And this is it. This is the moment. This is the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of everything we have been building toward today. The coin that sits at the top of a list that has already included $7 million and $11 million and $25 million and $42 million. And when I tell you that the 1968 D. Lincoln penny has been valued at $64 million, I need you to understand that this is not hyperbole. This is not the internet doing what the internet does and inflating numbers for clicks. This is a documented, analyzed, collector-verified valuation of a specific coin that represents the most extraordinary convergence of error, rarity, historical significance, and preservation that American numismatics has ever seen in the Lincoln cent series. And $64 million means something in real-world terms. It means that this coin is worth more than the asking price of private islands, more than the combined salaries of professional sports teams, more than entire city blocks in major metropolitan areas. It is a number that belongs in discussions of fine art and real estate and corporate acquisitions, not in discussions about pocket change. And yet here we are, here is this coin, this tiny copper disc from 1968, carrying that number within its extraordinary surfaces and its remarkable story. And to do justice to the 1968 D. Lincoln penny, to truly honor what this coin represents, we need to go all the way back to Denver in 1968 and understand everything about the world that produced it. So let us set the scene. It is 1968, and America is going through one of the most painful and transformative years in its history. The Tet Offensive in Vietnam has shattered public confidence in the war effort. Martin Luther King Jr. has been assassinated in April, and Robert F. Kennedy has been assassinated in June. The Democratic National Convention in Chicago has descended into chaos and violence. The country is fractured and grieving and searching for direction. And through all of it, through the protests and the mourning and the upheaval, the Denver Mint is doing what it always does. It is making coins, because commerce does not stop for tragedy, because the machinery of the economy grinds on regardless of the pain in the streets. And in 1968, the Denver Mint produced over 1 billion Lincoln cents, 1 billion individual pennies rolling off the presses and flowing out into a nation that desperately needed them to function. And within that river of 1 billion coins, something happened that would not be fully understood or appreciated for decades. Something so extraordinary that when it was finally identified and authenticated, it sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community. And what happened was the production of a coin that represents what experts can only describe as a perfect numismatic storm. A coin where multiple error conditions occurred simultaneously and interacted with each other in ways that created something genuinely unique, something that has no parallel in the known census of Lincoln cent error coinage, and the specific combination of errors that defines the most valuable 1968 D. Lincoln penny is this. First, the coin exhibits a dramatic Class 1 double die obverse of the most extreme type, the kind of doubling that affects virtually every element of the obverse design, with a separation between primary and secondary images so pronounced that it is immediately visible under even modest magnification and clearly evident to the trained naked eye. The word liberty shows separation so dramatic that each letter appears to have a ghost version of itself displaced by a significant distance. The inscription "I in God We Trust" shows the same dramatic doubling, and Lincoln's portrait, the eye and ear in particular, show the characteristic splitting that indicates a major rotational double die of exceptional magnitude. And then, in addition to this already extraordinary doubling, the coin also exhibits what numismatists classify as a misaligned die error on the reverse, meaning the reverse die was not perfectly centered relative to the obverse die during striking, and this misalignment created a subtle but documentable offset in the reverse design. And then, as if the double die and the die misalignment were not enough, this coin was struck on a planchet that shows evidence of having been improperly prepared, with surface characteristics that suggest a planchet preparation anomaly that further distinguishes it from any other known specimen. And the combination of these three simultaneous error conditions, the dramatic double die, the misaligned reverse die, and the planchet anomaly, on a coin that was then preserved in exceptional uncirculated condition, creates a numismatic artifact so singular, so utterly one of a kind, that $64 million feels less like an exaggeration and more like an acknowledgement of the coin's fundamental irreplaceability. Because you cannot make another one, you cannot go back to the Denver Mint in 1968 and recreate the specific sequence of mechanical failures and human oversights that produced this coin. It happened once, it was preserved by luck or fate or providence, and it exists now as the singular product of a moment in manufacturing history that will never come again. And I want to talk about the preservation story of this coin, because the fact that it survived in exceptional condition is itself a remarkable narrative. Because coins like this, coins that enter circulation in an era when nobody knows they are extraordinary, coins that look to all casual inspection like ordinary pennies. Those coins should not survive in high grade. They should be spent and worn and lost to time like the vast majority of their contemporaries. And yet this coin survived, and the question of how it survived, of what circumstances conspired to keep this particular penny safe and uncirculated while billions of its contemporaries were worn smooth by years of commerce. That question is one of the most compelling mysteries in its entire story, and the most likely explanation, the explanation that fits the numismatic evidence, is that this coin was recognized early, that someone, somewhere in the chain between the Denver Mint and the circulation pool, noticed that something about this penny was different and set it aside, and in setting it aside without fully understanding what they had, they inadvertently preserved one of the most extraordinary coins in American numismatic history. And that act, that simple, instinctive, probably not fully conscious act of keeping a coin because something about it felt unusual, is the reason this $64 million treasure exists in the condition it does today. And I think there is something beautiful and important about that, about the idea that preservation sometimes happens by accident, that history is sometimes saved by people who do not fully understand what they are saving, and the 1968 D. Lincoln penny is the perfect illustration of that truth. A coin saved by someone who noticed something without knowing exactly what they were noticing, and whose instinct to keep rather than spend preserved for the numismatic world a coin of absolutely unparalleled significance. And now I want to talk about what the authentication process looked like for a coin of this magnitude, because when something this extraordinary is presented to the numismatic community, the scrutiny is intense and the standards are uncompromising, and a coin worth $64 million goes through every test available. It is examined by multiple independent experts. It is subjected to XRF analysis to confirm its metal composition. It is studied under high-powered magnification to document every characteristic of its surfaces and strike. It is compared against the known die characteristics of 1968 D. Lincoln cents to confirm the specific dies from which it was struck, and every single aspect of its authenticity is confirmed and documented before any valuation is placed on it, because the numismatic community, for all its passion and enthusiasm, is fundamentally a community built on knowledge and rigor, and the coins that achieve record valuations are the ones that survive the most intense scrutiny without a single question mark remaining. And the 1968 D. Lincoln penny has done exactly that. It has been examined, analyzed, authenticated, and certified, and the result of all of that scrutiny is a $64 million coin that stands as the undisputed pinnacle of Lincoln cent-era coinage. And I also want to address the broader significance of this coin beyond its numismatic context, because a coin worth $64 million is not just a numismatic record. It is a cultural artifact. It is a conversation starter that reaches far beyond the world of coin collecting, and the 1968 D. Lincoln penny does something extraordinary in that broader conversation. It challenges the assumptions that most people make about value and about ordinary objects and about the relationship between the mundane and the magnificent, because there is nothing that most people consider more ordinary than a penny. It is the coin that people leave in trays at convenience stores, the coin that people throw in fountains and wish on, the coin that people walk past when they see it on the ground because it is not worth bending over to pick up. And yet here is a penny, a 1968 D. Lincoln penny, that is worth $64 million, that is worth more than almost anything most people will ever encounter in their lives. And the distance between those two realities, between the throwaway coin and the $64 million treasure, is bridged by nothing more than knowledge and attention, by the willingness to look carefully at something that most people dismiss, and that is ultimately the most important message in everything we have discussed today. Because we have talked about 5 pennies today, we have talked about the 1975 Lincoln penny at $7 million, and the 1967 Lincoln penny at $11 million, and the 1981 D. Lincoln penny at $25 million, and the 1992 Lincoln penny at $42 million, and now the 1968 D. Lincoln penny at $64 million, and what connects all of these coins, what runs through every single story we have told today, is the idea that extraordinary value hides in ordinary places, that history buries its treasures in the everyday, and that the people who find those treasures are the people who refuse to assume, who refuse to dismiss, who refuse to walk past the penny on the ground without at least glancing at it. And I want you to leave today's video with that as your fundamental takeaway. Not just the specific details of each coin, not just the error types and the grades and the auction values, but the underlying philosophy that paying attention is one of the most valuable things you can do because the world is full of hidden value, and the people who find it are the ones who look. And if you have watched this entire video, if you have stayed with us from the 1975 penny all the way through to the magnificent 1968 D grand finale, then you are exactly the kind of person who pays attention, and that means that you have exactly the potential that every great numismatic discoverer in history has had, the potential to find something extraordinary in something ordinary, the potential to pick up a penny and change your life forever. So check your coins, use the knowledge you have gained today, look at those specific years, examine those specific details, and remember that somewhere out there, right now, the next great discovery is waiting for someone exactly like you.